Alrighty, welcome back, boys and girls. It's your main math man, Mr. Shane, coming to you live from Summit Academy. And this video, picking up where we left off on that Unit 1 competency practice, we're looking at those pages 3 and 4. So on that problem number 5, it says to study these three graphs. So we got some weird looking graphs here. And it says which of these graphs, again, anytime it has that S in the parentheses, make sure you're thinking, hey, this means could be one or more. So again, anytime you see that S in parentheses, it means it could be more, one or more. And it's saying it has a domain of -5 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 4. So we're looking for a couple of things here. So let me actually select and highlight. So since we're talking about domain, we're saying, hey, our x values is what we're working with. Actually, I can highlight the whole way across because we're talking about x values. So now we can say, all right, what kind of x values do we have here? We're saying a couple things. That means we have closed circle. So, or passes through the point. Okay. Again, talking about domains, so we're working with those x values. So right away, if I'm looking at my first graph on the left, it is at -5. However, if I see or if I kind of point out and say that's an open circle right there, I know that it can't be, just by looking at that option, I know it can't be A or C because both of those have 1 in it and it has an open circle on that point, so that means that we can't include that one. Then if we look at option 2, it does actually pass through the point on -5, so let me kind of circle that in green. I'll say, hey, it goes through the point on -5 and it goes through the point on 4, so we know 2 is good. And same kind of idea, it's at its closed circle on 4 and on -5. So we can actually say for this one, it's going to be graph 2 and graph 3. So we would need, for it to not be graph 3, we would need like an open circle, or it wouldn't go to 4. For number 6, it says study 3 graphs, same pictures as before. Now we are talking about the y values since we're working with range. So I'm going to highlight kind of my y values, that way it's easier to see. As you're looking at your y values, keep in mind, again, we're talking about open closed circles, or if it passes through that point. So let's say looking for graphs, so it has open circle. Let me make sure, did I write open circle on the last one, or did I write closed? Okay, open circle on -5. So on -5 it's open, however on 3 it's closed, where it passes through. So where is that at? Well, looking at our options, we could say, hey, the first option is good. It's at -5, open circle, and it has a closed circle on +3, so that one works. Looking at our second option, it goes through the point on -5, so we cannot pick the second choice just by looking at that option. And it goes past our value on 3, so since it goes past 3, we know we can't pick that one, so we would have to say that's only going to be our first choice for our range. And so if you ever need to, you can kind of look at the picture, or you can also kind of list the range and the domains for each of those two options. Like I would list the range for these, and I list the domain for the previous one, and then kind of compare and look and see what I have. Moving on to number 7, it says Mr. Shane climbed Mount Bierstadt, which is 14,065 feet. He is now descending at a rate of 190 feet per minute. Which equation represents the elevation of Mr. Shank S after t minutes? So again, kind of a couple things we want to point out. So let me highlight and say, okay, I need 14,065 and I have 190. And also too, since I have that 190 and it says per minute, so that means I'm going to be multiplying. I'm going to be multiplying something together. The reason why I know that is because it has that keyword per. We're just saying, hey, it could be, multiplying or dividing. It has to be, not just a constant value. And so then it says, which equation represents the elevation of Mr. Shank? So it's going to say, this is going to be our dependent variable. And that makes sense because if we look at all of our options, it has the S is on the left side, and this is going to be our independent. Independent. Another way to think about your independent variable is going to be your x value, where dependent is going to be your y. So we're trying to come up with an equation. Usually looks like y equals mx plus b. Make sure that you're saying, okay, I have to have 190 feet multiplied times my x. So two options I can cancel out right away are going to be A and C, because those two options have 190 by itself, which I cannot have. So my two choices now, it's either going to be a true or false. So if you're thinking, okay, you're thinking about that wonderful view of that mountain, go up the mountain, now we're coming down. So we're saying at this level, so let me kind of make a dashed line. This is our 14,065, and now we're coming down. Again, descending means down. So if we plug in some values, if you wanted to kind of test it out, our function should be going down. So if I looked at my choice B and I plugged in 1, I would have a negative elevation, which isn't possible because that would mean I would be below this amount, which wouldn't make sense because I only moved for 1 second. So the only logical option, and you can always plug in values to check, but my only logical option should be D. So again, you're going from the sentence, so go from sentence to equation. Alrighty. Moving on to the next one, numero ocho. It says Mr. Shank S is a dominant force of nature in that basketball paint. He averages about 6.9 nice rebounds per game, while Mr. Taco T averages about 3.14 rebounds. Combined, they have gotten 420 rebounds this season. Which equation models this situation? Excuse me. So we're kind of picking a couple options here. So let me highlight and kind of see. So I read through it once, and then I can kind of pull together some information that I need. So we have some values. Notice how I have T and 3.14 go with green, and then I could say yellow should go with S. So those two should be together, and in green, those two should be together. Some people are going to pick and add, so they're going to see this word combined, and they're going to pick A or C because it adds those two together. However, that's not the case because we know that it's dependent on those two variables. So, the number of games that Mr. Shank plays is going to be different than the number of games Mr. Tonko plays. So it has to be, B or D. And since I have those two options highlighted carefully, I know that my choice that I should go with is B. This should actually be, I think this should actually be an S, but that's okay. we're going with that choice B. So we're saying for each game Mr. Shank plays, it's multiplied by 6.9, and then we do 3.14 times t. Those two added together after you multiply is equal to 420. For number 10, it says study the equation. So it has some distributive property. We have negative 7 over 6 times 12x plus 18 equals 14 times 1 minus 11x. Solve for x and show your work or explain. So let me do something like this. Anytime you have that distributive property, I'm going to set it up like this. So let's actually do on the side here. So I'm going to do my left side in pink. And so what I can do is this. I can have negative 7 over 6 on the outside. And then I have 12x on top and positive 18. Again, be careful. Make sure that you write your positive and negative symbols depending on what it is. So for example, inside parentheses is both positive. However, our products are going to be negative since we're multiplying different signs. So again, if you need to on the side, multiply carefully for yourself. If you need to review multiplying fractions, please do. So I have negative 7 over 6 multiplied times 12x over 1. Again, multiply those numerators together. I have negative 7 times 12 is, let's say, negative 84 over 6, because 6 times 1 is 6. And then I would divide that out, and I should end up with negative 14. So I'm going to say this is going to be, sorry, this is x and x. So I'm going to say this is negative, write that carefully, negative 14x. Same kind of idea, again, multiply it carefully, and I can say this is negative 21. On the right side, I'm going to do in green. I'm going to say I have, let's have 14 on the outside. I'm multiplying, oh man, can I draw a better box than that? Something like that. Weird looking cartoon, that's okay. So I have positive 1, and positive 14, and I'm multiplying 14 times 1 and 14 times 11, negative 11x. So let's do, this is going to be positive 14, and this is going to be 154. Yeah, so negative 154 times x. So now that I have my two products, again, this is what I just did was the distributive property. So if you need to double check on how to do that, please do ask. Distributive property. All right, so now I can rewrite my two sides of my equation. So I have negative 14x minus 21 is equal to 14 minus 154 times x. And so now if you ever have variables on both sides, so let me do that. Let me kind of move this around a little bit. Perfect. So let me say this. So if you have variables on both sides, you want to add the opposite of the lower coefficient. And if you're unsure when I say coefficient, I'm talking about either negative 154 or negative 14. Which one is lower? Which one is colder? So if you kind of think of like a thermostat or a thermometer, you're thinking, hey, that negative 154 is going to be lower, so that's what I'm going to add the opposite of to both sides. So I have plus 154x to both sides. So now I can use my inverse operations. I'm going to say this is going to be, let's have 140x minus 21 equals 14. add 21 to both sides. And I can say I have 140x is equal to 35. Last step is to divide both sides by the coefficient. So I divide both sides by 140. And I can say that my answer x is going to be 35 over 140. So if you're ever unsure, hey, how do I check to get my answer? Well, I can do this. I can pull out my wonderful graphing calculator. I can say, okay, I have 35 divided by 140. And that's going to be my answer. So if I wanted to, reduce that fraction or write it as 0.25, that's totally fine. But I can do this. I can say, well, I'm going to have my answer. So I hit second negative. It pulls down that previous answer. I'm going to hit that STO button. I'm going to store it into my variable x. Hit enter. And so now whenever I hit x, I have 0.25. Gotta be careful. Sorry. Anytime I hit x, I hit enter, there you go. It's 0.25 because that has my variable that's stored in there. And what I can do is I can substitute it back into my original equation. So I can substitute it back into my original equation. If those two sides are equal, then I know I'm good. So I'm going to say, all right, I have on the outside, I have -7 divided by 6. Use parentheses to show multiplication, so that I have 12x and plus 18. I'm saying, okay, that equals that side, and on the right side, I have 14 times 1 minus 11x. Hit enter, and since these two lines, so I can say since my left side and my right side come out to be the same value, which is -24.5, I know that my answer originally, my answer of x equals 0.25, I know that my answer is correct. So again, be careful when you're plugging this in, because you want to say that this is your answer. That 0.25 or that fraction is going to be your answer. So that way you know for sure, hey, I can check. I proved it using my calculator. Both my sides are equal. Same kind of idea for number 10. Study that equation and solve it. I have a couple distributive properties to do. So I'm going to say, okay, I have on the side here, let me do like what I did last time. Let's actually use purple. So I'm going to say on this side, on this side, I have 2 times -4x and 2 times +5. So this is going to be -8x and +10. Again, I have videos on distributive property. Make sure that if you're really struggling on how this is set up, please do ask. I'm more than willing to help you out. Same idea for the next part. Be mindful of that negative symbol. I'm going to have and multiply each of those terms by -2. So on the outside, I have -2. Inside the parentheses, I have +8 and -10x. So I'm going to multiply -2 times +8, -16. -2 times -10x is +20x. Again, be careful, take it one step at a time. That way you have it. And so let me rewrite my equation. So I now have -8x plus 10 plus 10 minus 16 plus 20x. And I have equals, and then on my right side, so 3 minus 6x. Again, we did our distributive property, so if you need to have some order operations, you certainly can. We did our distributive property, there it is. Now we're going to combine like terms. So I need to make sure that I'm looking for terms that share a variable in common. So I'm going to say I can combine 8x and +20x, and that's going to equal 12x. And then I can combine positive 10 and negative 16 to get negative 6. Same step as before, still combining like terms. We have to get variables on one side. If we look and see, hey, my coefficient of negative 6 is lower, so that's what we're going to add the opposite. So opposite of negative 6 is positive 6x to both sides. And so we're going to say we have this. We have 18x minus 6 equals 3. Add 6 to both sides. And so I have 18x equals 9. Divide both sides by 18. And get your answer. So I can say that x is going to be equal to 0.5 or 1 over 2. Either way works. And so if I actually look at my answer choices, I would say, hey, I see that my answer is right here. I have x equals 9 over 18, which is the same as what I had. So I'm going to pick that last choice. Again, you can take and plug that value back into your original equation. Use that store function on the graph calculator. Be sure to ask questions. And as always, super slam that subscribe button.